Jay, what's up, man? So I'm gonna record this quick video for you. I know you weren't able to get the machine files exactly sent and set up the way that you wanted it to, but I think we can make do with what we have already. So as you can see, I loaded up your file over here in Isotope Ozone. So I can see you already from right off the bat. Like, I know you've been working on some mastering stuff. I can see your volume levels are solid. But overall, man, my overall thoughts of the beat are really good, man. Like, at least from the conversations we've had, it sounds like you've been working on your skills, since we started the founding members program. And man, like, I know you've come a long way. This sounds excellent, man. So basically, I listened to this a few times, listened to your beat a few times, and I just had a few minor takeaways, a few minor things that I thought you could tweak in order to improve this song and songs that you're making in the future. So I'm going to go ahead and sort of play a few seconds of this beat, and then we'll get into the stuff that we can work on. So let's, start from the beginning.
DJ Chosen One. Run the track!
So already the build is nice, man. Like, the build that you start off with just the basic sample, you introduce that bass line, and it sort of gets more complicated, and then you build into the drums. I like that way of arranging a track just to sort of get things, really, just to build momentum in a song. It sounds better to me that way, so I like the way that you did that. So like I said, man, I can tell you've been doing a lot of work. Your mix overall is really solid. It really is, man. Like, your balance is down tight. I can hear everything in the track distinctly. Your samples is at the right level as compared to your drums. You've got things spaced out correctly. Overall, I definitely like the choice of sample, like that. I don't even know what type of instrument that is really, but the way that you combine that with the bass line, I think that brought it together. And those vocal chops that you added. I don't know, is that Michael Jackson? But they definitely added a little flavor. That's something I think I can add to the beats that I'm making. Just some simple vocal chops really take things, a step further. And also the thing that I like is your snare drum, man. I think maybe you that's a stock sound that you've gotten somewhere, but it sounds like you layered a clap and a snare together and added some reverb on top of that. And the clap is really powerful, man. It sounds nice. And another thing that I like is that not everything is. A lot of beats that I listen to from people they're trying to do too much at once. They've got 1,000 sounds loaded inside of their project, 1,000 things going on. All of them are sort of like competing for attention from each other. But your beat is not overly busy. There's few fundamental things that you're working with, and you're doing those things well. And that's what I like about the style of beat that you made. That's what I like about what I've heard so far. But there are just some minor things that I think that you can work on to get where you want. And it's not really technical stuff. Like, technically, I think your mixing skills are down solid. But there's just some creative techniques that you can use to work on and sort of incorporate into the new music that you're making, and maybe this track as well. So what you have, like I said, is already great. From where you are right now, I just focus on getting like an extra 10% out of all the stuff that you already have. So squeezing an extra 10% out of your kick drum, an extra 10% out of the overall vibe of the track, an extra 10% out of the arrangement. Just so that all of those incremental increases, those slight increases in what we have already, are going to amount to something significant in terms of the improvement of your sound now and in the future. And we're about to talk about how I do that right now. So when we talked on the phone, you mentioned that you wanted your drums to hit a little harder in the mix. And you can do this in a few different ways. So from what I can tell, the problem for you in this track is not it's not the mixing necessarily. It's a creative application. And I'll explain what I mean by that. The problem really isn't that, you have masked frequencies within your beat. The problem isn't that you have a solid drum sound and it's being muffled by things going on elsewhere in your beat. The problem is that the drum sound that you have needs to be adjusted to really punch and add more depth and fullness to the overall sound. And there's a few ways that you can do that. There's a few ways that you can add more to your kick drum so that it'll hit a little bit harder in your mix and be more full. So that's going to be the goal, is to add more low end to this mix, like that, I'm sure you know that Tribe Called Quest style, Jay Dilla style. Add more low end and fullness, that low end theory. So what you have already sitting in that low end is that bass sound, but it's really thin. And the kick drum that you already have is not full necessarily. So you have more room to add in low end stuff, to add in low end frequencies. And by low end, I mean around 40 hertz to 50 hertz. That's really the sub bass. That is the frequency ranges that are really going to push a subwoofer, push, in your car stereo. That's going to add that boominess, that stuff that you really feel in your feet and in your back. That's the frequencies that you really feel. They're felt, really not heard. So the way that you can do this is by throwing in a sub kick. Typically, these are 808 drums. Now, when most people think of 808s, they think of trap music. Well, what they don't know is that 808s are useful for way more than just trap beats, right? It's just the way that people have been, arranging 808 drum patterns and the way they've been using 808s recently that's kind of changed. But they've been using 808 drums to make hip-hop for a long time. And all those Tribe songs that you listen to, 808s are fully featured. So basically what you can do is layer an 808 with the drum sound that you already have, okay? So in addition to the drum that you already have, which is probably going to have a lot of information within the 120 hertz range, 90 hertz to 120 hertz, you can make that drum even more full by adding in 808 sounds, which is going to have the majority of its frequencies between 40 and 50 hertz. So not only will you have that 90 to 120 hertz kick drum that is already in your mix, but you'll also have that 40 to 50 hertz combined with that 120 hertz to make a more full and forceful and powerful drum sound. And when they're combined together in the right way, you cannot really, it's not distinguishable. It doesn't sound like, some trap drums, but it sounds like a really full kick drum on its own. And to be honest, they make this really easy to do with Machine 2.0. I know you're working with 1.8, but the new drum synths in 2.0 make that super, super, super duper simple. And since I've gotten 2.0, I've started incorporating this technique into the beats that I'm working on. So basically, 2.0 allows you to build that custom 808 that'll sit perfectly underneath the drum that you already have. The kick drum is already in your mix. And you can add things like, you can adjust things like the length of the 808 kick drum that you're layering underneath to perfectly match up with the length of the kick drum you're already working with. You can adjust the tune of the 808. You can adjust different characteristics about your drum so that when they're combined together, when they're both being played at the same time, it sounds like one kick only. It doesn't sound like, trap drums. It sounds like a really full and powerful kick drum that's not only going to sound boom bap in a sense, but at the same time it's going to add more force and it's going to be more pleasing to the ear because it's going to incorporate those sub frequencies. So what I do is I'd use an EQ to sculpt out the frequencies below 50 hertz in the drum that you already are using in your mix, and then I'd add an 808 drum and tune it correctly, adjust the decay correctly. The decay is the tail of that 808 correctly so that it matches up with the characteristics of the drum that you already have. And when you combine those two together, it's going to make something very, very nice. So the second thing that you could try to do is EQ the current kick that you're using. I know I just said sculpt out the frequencies below 50 hertz, but you could also boost frequencies within the kick that you already have below 50 hertz to try to bring out more of that low end, the subsonic frequencies. Um, at the same time, the problem that you'll probably run into is you can only boost frequencies in digital information. You can only boost the sound that is in those frequencies, meaning that if you don't have a lot of, or any at all, of those that digital information already in the sound that you're using, boosting it at 50 hertz is really not going to do much. As a matter of fact, it's probably just going to fuck up what you already have. So you'll have to experiment with that. So using EQ, I just try like a 5 decibel boost in those low frequency range which we just talked about, between 40 and 50 hertz, and just see if that sounds right to you. If it doesn't, you can try the first method that we just talked about. We can also try boosting in the 130 hertz to 2000 hertz range. This range is going to add more click, more pop, more snap to your kick drum. It's going to allow it to be heard easier, the attack phase to be heard easier. So if you boosted this, and this says right here 130 hertz to 2000 hertz, that's a huge frequency range, and the reason that you're going to have to basically you're going to have to add your EQ. I'd notch up a 5 decibel boost in the EQ, start at the 130 hertz range, and then search through, keep increasing the hertz, the frequency range, and search through up until 2000 hertz to try to find something that sounds good with that 5 decibel boost, and then dial it in correctly after that. That's going to add more top, more snap to your kick drum. You can do that also in combination with adding that 808 in the 50 hertz that we just talked about. So it'll add way more fullness inside of the frequency range that you want for your kick drum. It's going to add more force in all of the frequency ranges that you want to be working with. So when used in combination, man, just think about this. If you add that 5 decibel boost at, say, let's say 1000 hertz is what you end up deciding on, or what sounds best, and you also add that 808 at 50 hertz, you're going to have a kick drum that spans those frequency ranges, right? So you're going to have a more powerful, more forceful kick drum that's really going to impact when it hits. Not to say that it's the one that you have already sounds good, but you can squeeze out an extra, like I said, an extra 10% out of the sound that you already have. And those incremental changes, just a little bit of change, a little bit of improvement over, each sound in your mix is going to really work on, it's going to really improve the overall quality of the final result, what we hear out of the speakers. Also, what you could do is add transient master for more punch, more snap in that kick drum that you already have. You can sculpt the attack phase, that initial hit of the kick drum, to add more punch. Saturation, tape saturation specifically, these are all stock plugins on Machine, can also bring in more punch. Another thing that you could do is try finding a mono plugin. Blue Cat has an EQ plugin. I just searched that on Google. If I was you, search Blue Cat EQ. They have a mono EQ plugin, so that when you throw that on your signal train, on the sound level of your kick drum, throw on that mono plugin, it'll cause the kick drum to sit directly, perfectly in the center of your mix. So it sounds like there's some stereo information within the kick drum that you're working with, meaning that not only is your kick drums in mono, but it's also in stereo a little bit. And the problem with that is that you could be losing some digital information from your kick drum because some stereo information is being blocked by the sample or other sounds that are in stereo within your mix. So I would try that to see if it helps. Another thing, the timing of your kick is slightly off, just a little bit. This is going to sound nitpicky, but this is something that I'm really cognizant and aware of in my beats. It's something that I for real, getting the timing of my drum loop down correct is probably a good third of the time that I spend making my beats, just because it's that important. or at least to me, in my music. It's important when you're building your groove, in my opinion, to spend a lot of time perfecting that drum, perfecting the drum groove, to make sure that the timing in between the MIDI notes and the information that you have is down correct. Just because I build my drums first, if I spend a third of the time, say whatever, 10 minutes getting that drum groove down correct, I know that anything that I add on top of that, since my drum groove is in perfect timing, anything that I add on top of that, the sample, the instruments, anything I can have a foundation and know that my drum groove is in timing, so that anything I have on top of that is going to have to be in time with the drum groove. The problem that you have right now is that since your MIDI notes are slightly off in your kick drum, by adjusting those MIDI notes on the kick drum, you're going to set off like a chain reaction with the timing of the other things in your beat. Because you've built your beat around the timing of mistimed kick drums, the different sounds in your beat are based upon the timing of the kicks that you already have. So that if you adjust the kicks now, it might set off that chain reaction so that you have to fix like 10 different things, or 5 different things within your mix to make sure that the timing sits right. So it's much better, in my opinion, to start with the drum groove to make sure that the timing of that is right before you move on. So keep that in mind as you're creating new stuff. It sounds like you have a 2-bar loop. There's just a few notes of that kick drum that are throwing the timing of that drum groove off. Now this could be what you're going for. If so, then keep it the way that you want it. But that's just a suggestion to get an extra 10% out of the drums that you already have. So as you can see, like, it's very detailed oriented, very nitpicky stuff. But if you squeeze 10% out of the timing of your drum groove, 10% extra out of the kick drum, 10% extra out of all these little extra things, it can significantly add up to the final result that you're working for. You could change a beat that's a B minus into a beat that's an A minus. You know what I'm saying? Very quickly by just getting all the little tiny details perfected and right in your beat. So another thing that I would do, this is the final thing that I'd talk about, is adding a little bit more. I just told you about minimalism in the sense that, I like that you did not have too much going on in your beat. But just adding a few more instruments, not necessarily all at once, not necessarily playing at the same time as your drums, your bass, your sample, but maybe if you added another melodic instrument, like maybe an airy orchestral synth in the background. How kind of Dilla has that like synth sound that's sort of the strings that are playing in the background, sort of just like as like an ambience type thing, or maybe like a synth or something, or a pad in the background. If you added just one more thing, you can play around a lot more with the dynamics. Dynamics meaning the difference between sound and no sound in your beat. So dynamics really help as far as engaging your listener and creating that variance in your beat that causes people's ears to really perk up. So if you added more instruments, it would allow you to change different points in your arrangement where you can drop things in and out of the mix and create more variance and excitement with the things that you have going on. So I would see if you could figure out how to add one more element to this beat, as far as not necessarily something that's going to be in the forefront of your beat, but something that you could take in and out at random points to sort of add more change to the dynamics that you already have at play. But otherwise, man, like, what you have already is you're light years ahead of where a lot of people are, man. There's just a few things that you need to work on in order to get where you want to go. Like, your sampling skills already solid. You already have a good understanding of the drums, the song arrangement. The build is nice. Your mixing skills, man. You're talking on the phone talking about the mix that you had that you wanted to improve, but man, your mixing is already solid. Like, there's just slight things that you can do creatively in terms of creating your drum sounds in a different way, or adding a little bit more to what you already have, and adding that little 10% in different places, and you're going to be exactly where you want to be, man. So keep working hard, Jay. I will call you at some point within the next day or two, and we can talk about specifically any questions that you have. But otherwise, good job, man. I'll holler at you later. Peace.